Welcome, everybody. I'm Matthew Daughter, the Executive Director of Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I hope you can hear me okay. I just want to welcome you to the electronic version, the e-version or remote version, or whatever you'd like to call it, of our speaker series. It's a monthly event, and oddly, because of COVID right now, and we're experimenting with online digital distribution like this, we're able to do it in the summer, which is unusual for us. So I'm really happy to see you all here and to welcome you to the speaker series. I just want to tell you a few dates that are coming up. On September 16th, Jack Laws will be talking about nature journaling and his mission to bring artwork to people's lives. Richard Tejeda, the founder and CEO of Saved by Nature, will be appearing on September 23rd, just a week after Jack Laws. On the 19th, in between those two speakers, we'll have our annual meeting, which will be a Zoom event like this. We're in the early stages of planning right now, but I know it's going to be great. We've got David Tom, an artist from San Francisco, a conservationist and activist, appearing in October. And John Richardson, a board member, world traveler, and photographer, will be appearing in November. So those dates are all posted on our website. And this evening, we're welcoming Mike Azevedo, who I have known for just a little more than a year. And when I came on as the director at Audubon, I met him within the first week or so of my coming on. And I liked him immediately. I thought he was passionate about not only the bluebirds, but about native plants. And somehow we found ourselves teamed up on a panel in Los Altos Hills.
It's your fault.
Hall. Pardon?
Your fault.
Yeah. So Los Altos Hills, and then again in Los Altos Garden Club. Now the Garden Club event was interesting because it was just the two of us. We did not have the third member of the panel, Michelle Unger, on that date. But the bad thing was that I took so long in talking that I cut Mike short. And it was the Garden Club, so he was actually the star of the show. So ever since then, I felt guilty about that, and I want to give him all the time in the world to get through his material tonight. Just a little bit, tiny bit of background of him. He went to Humboldt State University and majored in wildlife management. He's the coordinator of Santa Clara Valley Audubon's Nest Box program, Cavity Nesters Recovery Program. And it was at the Cal Bluebird Recovery Program where he had some insights about habitats that you can create in your own backyard. And that's what he's going to be talking about tonight. And without further ado, I want to welcome Mike to Speaker Series and lift a glass to you and take it away, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm hoping I do this right. Let's see. Play. Hey, Barry, is it up? Does it look right? Oh yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I don't go through the whole thing and don't do it right. Okay, first of all, I'm going to be referencing a resources sheet, and what that is a bunch of the links and things like that I've sent to Barry, and he's basically got it all. Should have it all right now. It sounds like he hasn't formatted it perfectly, but he's working on that. But it's all available to you, and I think you want to say how anybody would get a hold of the sheet right now.
So if you want to get a hold of it right now, there's a link in the chat. So if you click on the chat button at the bottom of your screen, you should see the link. It's like the second or third thing I posted. But it's scvas.org/backyard-wildlife-resources.
So it's just a bunch of writing right now, which has basically links to YouTube videos and stuff like that, along with, I'm going to be bringing up a bunch of subjects, and there's more information on those subjects in there. Barry's going to be keeping track of the questions, any questions that come in. If there's anything he can answer, he'll go ahead and answer them. And then at the end of the talk, then he'll go ahead and bring up any questions, and we'll kind of take them one at a time and do it that way. So the California Bluebird Recovery Program is an organization that has been promoting the use of nest boxes since 1996. And we have county coordinators all over the state ready to answer questions and help people learn how to monitor nest boxes. The Cavity Nester Recovery Program, which is actually part of the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, was actually started in 1997 as an affiliate to the California Bluebird Recovery Program. Contact on information for both organizations can be found in the resources sheet. So the definition of habitat is the food, water, shelter, space, as well as places to raise your young and whatever other things an animal would need to survive. And what we need is a complete habitat. In some cases, we'll be talking about we have part of what some of the animals need, but we are missing entire components without everything that they need. It's not a habitat. It's not complete habitat, and it's just not going to work. So this is Guadalupe River Park. It's a little bit different than I didn't used to have all of the tents and stuff like that when I was there, at least. Well, it did at some point, but it's worse now. But anyway, so at Guadalupe River Park, where I used to work, we had no bluebirds until about 2010. And as the Cavity Nester Recovery Program was getting more and more successful, birds who filled up habitat elsewhere began to look for new habitat. And eventually they found their way to Guadalupe River Park. But there was no real nesting cavities there. We fixed that by adding nest boxes. This is why we're getting bluebirds in other areas. So as we establish birds where they are, then they can spread into new areas. So you might have a place with one nest site or two lousy sites in a place, and the size of the FAA fields there at Guadalupe River Park, but it just isn't enough. And the chances that a bird will be able to make its way from a Rastradero Preserve, one of our original bluebird reservoirs, to find the one nesting location at Guadalupe River Park is just very remote. So little by little, we're helping them at the reservoir where they start out, and we're allowing them to be pushed into new areas. So we keep getting reports of bluebirds showing up in new places, and this is how it was done. Because we started in the reservoir, the area where they started, and we helped them move into new areas. Even in the reservoir, it doesn't necessarily mean that they had a lot of places to nest, but they had enough to keep things going. So by giving them, by upping the number of nesting cavities, we're able to help them out there where they started, and then they end up spreading out further out. Birds don't commute. When a parent bird is looking for a nest site, they'll be looking for food first. Then they will be looking for a place to raise their young. They won't always get what they want, and they might have to take a nest site that is far from ideal, but they're driven to reproduce. They'll take what's available, but there's a huge trade-off. The safety of their young, who are hunted day and night by predators of all shapes and sizes. This is like a human couple moving into a home that they know may result in the death of their children, but there is simply no other choice. This quote from Doug Ptolemy, 96% of terrestrial birds rear their young on insects, and caterpillars are a particularly important food source. So that's an indication as to why insects are so important to the ecosystem. And I want to talk a little bit more about Doug Ptolemy. So I knew native plants were important, but I didn't know the extent of how important they were until I watched Doug Ptolemy presenting Restoring Nature's Relationships. And I really highly recommend it. In fact, my talk basically is built around the concepts that he talked about in his hour-long video. I've included a link to his talk, to the talk from the LA chapter. He gave a talk at the LA chapter of the California Native Plant Society in February of 2018. He's given several talks since then in California. I've attended 2 or 3 of them, and I've met him several times now. but he is he's awesome. And the things that he was that he talks about during this hour-long presentation, that really important that for everybody to know. So like I said, I'm hoping everybody, if you haven't already seen it, that you get a chance, go ahead and take a look at that. So some plants are very good at delivering pollen, and many native bees are specifically looking for the pollen. I'll be making a big deal about native plants in this presentation, but there are non-native plants that are good sources of pollen. And nectar is another commodity that pollinators really look for. And again, there are some non-native plants that do a good job of providing nectar. The Xerces Society still says that many native plants do a better job of providing nectar and pollen. But even some scientists who should know insist that there are some non-natives that can even do a better job of providing nectar and pollen. Many pollinator gardens I see concentrate on nectar and pollen. Here's the problem. Nectar is another commodity and the pollinators really look for, and oh, I'm sorry. Okay, here's the problem. With few exceptions, a plant that can host the caterpillars of lepidopterans, moths, and butterflies are native. Pollen and nectar plants can be non-native, but without native plants, many pollinators are still in trouble. They really need native plants. And this is where we start to see exactly what is happening here to our insects. Because if you get your plants from Home Depot, Lowe's, or even many plant nurseries, you'll find a plethora of non-native plants. The number of host plants that you can find at a nursery is very small. Most nurseries have no plants that are native to the very location those nurseries are located. That means that there are no native plants in the typical backyard. This is where the conspiracy comes in. People don't plant native plants in their backyard in many cases because there are no native plant choices at their local nursery. And yet, here you have a perfectly green yard. In this case, it's actually a park, but you have a perfectly green park and an ecological dead zone. Sure, it may provide nectar and pollen, but as important as caterpillars have been found to be, there are none in the typical backyard garden. Now, there's a lot of them that do have them, but the point is you can do a lot better. We need to think again about how we do our landscaping. If you do have native birds in your yard, there's a plant that is responsible. So I love monarchs, but I consider them kind of a shiny thing, just like bluebirds. When you hear about planting milkweed for them, you may have noticed that no one seems to mention other butterflies. And if they don't tell you what to do about it. According to the Xerces Society, excuse me, according to the Xerces Society, as bad off as monarchs are, there are other local butterflies who are in even worse trouble. Of course, that doesn't mean that I want you to stop planting milkweed, but I'm going to provide some tools that will let you know how to help other butterflies and moths, and I hope you use them. So you may be wondering, how does Mike expect me to know what plants are native? Is there some way of finding information on native plants? Which ones should I plant and where should I get them? So this is calscape.org. I just want to give a quick demonstration on it. Notice this field up here. It says California, but you can narrow it down. I type in Los Altos Hills, but you can type in your exact address and Calscape will use your address to let you know exactly what plants would have been found in your area if you had been around before it was developed. All the plants that are considered native to Los Altos show up. For example, here are all the trees that are native to Los Altos. There's quite a few. So I want to give you a quick look at one of the plants, the Coast Live Oak. You can see all the information that you get from it. First of all, you get good photos of the species. And see, obviously you got the big guy up here, but if you look all down here, you got other photos you can also look at. And then there's a range map for the plant species. And under the photos, is a narrative about the plant species, giving useful information for anyone who knows, who wants to know more about it and other information. And then there's the wildlife supported. This is really, this is recent, and it's a great thing for us who want to help our butterflies and moths. And then there's the landscaping information, such as how much sun it needs and or can stand, moisture needed. Companion plants is a great thing to know because we often plant one plant, and by using this set of data, we can find plants that have similar water compatibility. People often plant oak trees by themselves and ignore everything else that goes along with it. This is a very underrated and underused practice, using plant communities. And one of the best features of the whole thing is the nurseries that can carry the plant. You can find the closest nursery that carries it. In some cases, you can even find a California Native Plant Society nursery that deliberately propagates local genotype plants. I wanted to point out how important it is that we plant host plants for our butterflies, and I was wondering if we had any butterflies that were rare in our area, and I came across the bay checker spot. Now, the bay checker spot is also a subspecies of the Edith checker spot, and so when you look on CalScape, you can find information about butterflies, but unfortunately, you're not going to find bay checker spot. You're going to find Edith's checker spot, which is like the species, and bay checker spot is a subspecies. So so it's let's see. Thanks to a biologist named Paul Ehrlich, the bay checker spot is still around, and I've heard of this butterfly before. And based upon what I've read, this is a well-studied butterfly. Unfortunately, I didn't see anything suggesting that its range is expanding back to what it once was. There's landscaping information. I need to change my page. Okay, so what we know the primary host is a plant called dwarf California plantain. It's endangered. And the secondary host is purple owl's clover or exerted Indian paintbrush. And the primary habitat is native grassland located in large serpentine outcroppings. Now that serpentine, it's kind of a salty substrate underneath, and that's not necessarily going to fit everybody's backyard, and so that would be kind of a hard place for everybody to be able to find just anywhere. Secondary habitat includes islands and such grasslands on smaller outcrops. Tertiary habitat is on non-serpentine soils with similarities to serpentine soils. The butterfly has 17,000 acres. It started with 23,000, but several thousand acres were taken away of the refuge. And as far as I could tell, the butterfly population is not expanding at all. So it needs a pesticide-free suitable habitat kept free of invasive weedy grasses. And restored habitat should be native grasses with plantain, and if possible, those other plants. Now, this California plantain, that's actually out there. You can get that. It's in several nurseries, and it's available by seed. The other secondary species are not necessarily going to be as available, but I was wondering if we could tell the California Native Plant Society, hey, what would be really cool is if we could find the seed from this and try and deliberately raise some of these secondary plant hosts. So here's the CalScape information on the plantain. Though we know that this plant really should have serpentine soil, CalScape doesn't say that it is necessary. We may not be able to set up better than tertiary habitat, but that would be better than nothing. So, so here's a range map. Now, with the areas that it has been extirpated, those are the red areas, and you can see down in the legend, it tells you when those areas have been extirpated, basically, as it went along. The green areas are the areas where this butterfly still is around. So it is now only found in southern San Jose towards Gilroy. This is bad news, but on the other hand, I'm talking to an audience that might be able to do something about it. So here is where it is. And note that the population is shown up here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. It's shown up at Edgewood Park. That's deliberate because the people at Edgewood Park, they got a big volunteer group, and they have been going down and trying to reintroduce the butterfly to Edgewood Park. So that's great news. So it's starting up there. But the problem is, if they try and move further out, where are they going to go? Do we have suitable habitat outside the ring where they are? Now, I was looking, but you know what I did do? I looked to see where, how far they might go, how far they might migrate, how far they might look for new digs. And I actually found it. And so sure enough, this butterfly has been studied. And they said 4.7 miles is about how far you can expect this butterfly to go to find new habitat, okay? So here is, as far as I can tell, I looked as hard as I could to figure out where that northernmost green spot was. And it looks to me like it's Los Lagos Golf Course and Coyote Creek in here. And that's great. I don't know how much habitat there is there. I don't know if this butterfly just kind of showed up, but there's nothing there for it. I do know that the actual refuge that was set up is further south than this. But what I do know is that if there's any hope at all, we need to set up new habitat for it. So based on what we did with the bluebirds, what you would do is you'd say, where is the butterfly? And you would go in and set up habitat there. Even though it's there, you don't want to pretend that it is going to be just fine. You want to go up and really expand the area that it has to feed on, the patch, get a bigger patch of this plantain. So you would start there, but then you want to do more. So the way I look at it is this is about the line where they kind of, this is, you know, it's basically they were below the line here. And I figured that if we set up some more plantain here at Hellier Park, maybe go over and talk to the people over at this Oak Hill Funeral Home, and then we go to Japanese Friendship Garden, or not Friendship Garden, but maybe Happy Hollow, maybe Kelly Park, we go up to Pruce and go over to Lake Cunningham. We could probably talk them into allowing a volunteer group to go in and put in a patch of this plantain, and it would have to be maintained, because part of the problem is we don't want herbicides around it. We don't want pesticides around it of any kind. So we'd need to go in, strip out all the weeds, and go and just really be on top of weeds and stuff, so the plantain doesn't get overrun. Because part of the problem that they've been having is the nitrates from pollution have been really generating all those the invasive weeds that have just been choking out the native plantain. So that's my idea. Anyway, so like I said, we got plantain in. We got sources. There's this. These are the sources that Calcscape says you can go to actually get the plantain. I'll be talking about more about using seeds later on, and I really recommend that. So you might be thinking to yourself, will the Parks Department really let us do this? And I say yes. He's doing it the right way. They absolutely will. It's great PR. It would be a great project for Happy Hollow, for example. It would look good in the papers. You can pick up more volunteers, and as long as we have a good core of people willing to spearhead it. Now, the butterfly does have a refuge, but it will never get off that refuge if we don't do something like this. It could fly forever and never find another batch of host plants. If you live in the zone where this butterfly is fairly close, it would be a good plant to have a little patch of. So at this time, you might be thinking that I'm nuts. You might be thinking that you can't bring a species back from the brink. Well, that's not true. Because if you have heard about the silver digger bee in San Francisco, they were doing some restoration and came back to find the species that they had nearly lost all over. They've got it back now. It hadn't been seen since, I believe, the 20s, at least the 30s. There's a link to a news story about it in the resource page. So it can be done. And if you haven't heard about Tim Wong, he's an aquatic biologist at California Academy of Science, and he deliberately went and is trying to introduce the pipevine swallowtail to San Francisco. Between California Academy of Sciences and his backyard, he's been setting up habitat there, and he has been going and getting the caterpillars and babysitting them and getting them. So it can be done. And when you watch that video I asked you to watch, the hour-long Doug Ptolemy video, his final story, I can't spoil it for you, but basically it's the Autala butterfly, and it was thought to be extinct for years. They couldn't get it listed for endangered status because they thought that it was gone. And they saved it by accident. So it's a great story, and it's one of hope and inspiration. And there are other endangered butterflies. Now, I don't think that most of these other ones are in Santa Clara County, but they are nearby. So if you're outside of Santa Clara County and you're wondering if there's a butterfly in your area that might use help, yeah, there is. Okay, so let me talk about, this is my backyard in Manteca. And first up, I live in the Central Valley now. My yard is as near as I could figure to fairly unique in terms of a Manteca yard. So I moved into my house 2 years ago, and my backyard was nothing but sand. I believe that they sprayed the crap out of it, and it got to the point where there was really nothing there. So essentially it started with nothing. So everything that's in my yard, all the animals that are in my yard have come in since I planted my yard. So I wanted to give you a little inspiration for habitat gardening. Now I'm just learning how to do this, and I have to say that I'm impressed by what's going on with the insect life in my yard. Now you may have heard about the painted lady migration that we had last year. We had a similar one this year, and I had a lot of painted ladies stopping by my yard, and I have a lot of host plants that are in my yard for the painted lady. So I'm hoping that I'm going to have a lot of painted lady caterpillars. I attended an online webinar by the Xerces Society, and they actually said that the fiery skipper might be in trouble. I tried to find more information about it, and I got conflicting information, so I'm not actually sure if it's in trouble or not, but I do have it in my yard, so that's cool. And I don't even know what this moth is. What I can tell you is that moths in general need our help. Doug Ptolemy said he's actually more worried about moths than he is about butterflies. That one reason for that might be that butterflies are shiny things compared to moths. And so everybody's worried about butterflies and nobody's thinking about moths. Just because butterflies are so beautiful and moths are so drab, but we need to help our moths too. And frankly, I can't believe the number of moths I see flying around my yard. I certainly never noticed it when I didn't have a habitat garden. So it really speaks to, if you plant, they will come. So moths are caterpillars too, and they definitely feed the birds. So this is a Clepsis fucana, and I've never been so excited to see a drab little moth like this. I think that the fact that I've got all these moths hosting off my plants, and I can't even tell which plants they're coming from, is a testament to the fact that we can have all these insects in our yard without really even noticing the damage that some people think that they may cause. Our San Joaquin County chapter of the California Native Plant Society has just met right before COVID started. They're trying to get reformed. They've been kind of silent for about 5 years. They're trying to come back. So I'm hoping to have some really good things happening in San Joaquin and Stanislaus counties really soon. A lot of the things that I'm seeing in my yard are flies, such as this brown-haltered bee mimic fly, or this common drone fly, or the sweat bee. Now, I've actually got a couple of different kinds of sweat bees in my yard. And one of the things about sweat bees is they do nest in the ground. And I want to talk about that. I believe that I have the only open ground in anywhere within a couple of blocks of me at the very least, because most people have been putting in concrete and swimming pools and grass and mulch, and nobody is leaving open ground. And that's a problem for the bees that actually nest in the ground. And when I said that the bluebirds don't like to commute, I don't think anything likes to commute. And I think a lot of people say, well, you know what, just let them go out and find their homes wherever they are. But what I'm telling you is I think that we need to provide homes near the food. When we put in a pollinator garden, we should be putting in homes near the pollinator garden. Here's the teddy bear bee. The teddy bear bee is actually the male valley carpenter bee. I actually had the female, which is the black carpenter bee, I showed for the pollen slide. Let's see, we got one thing I've noticed. This is a convergent lady beetle. One thing that seems to be an indication of a ecosystem health in my yard is the presence of so many predators. So in addition to a lady beetle, I've also had a toad running around my yard. He always runs like hell, which is kind of comical for a toad, but I only ever notice him right when he panics and runs for cover. And the reason that this is interesting is that my house, like I said, it's only 2 years old. I can't figure out where the toad came from. Another thing I see a lot of in my yard is another set of predators, damselflies and dragonflies. And another thing, I don't have photos that are, but I have lizards in my yard. Until just a couple of weeks ago, I hadn't seen any lizards in the yard. And the only time I saw them was when my neighbors started spraying. They had the pest control company coming in and spraying, and I think that they dove for cover by diving into my yard. I haven't seen them again since then, so I'm really hoping that they survive. So this is a sand wasp, which I believe might be a predator. It might be a pollinator. It might be both. I'm not sure. I'm seeing conflicting information. And it's another ground digger. And this is another digger. The digger wasp is also a predator. So when it digs, I believe what it's doing is actually burying prey along with its eggs. Both of these wasps dig in the ground with the sweat bees, with pollen and eggs or for reproduction. So I'm sure that these two also dig for reproductive purposes. And another thing I've seen a lot of is birds. So I've got lark and white-crowned sparrows, house finches, western bluebirds, sage phoebe, black phoebe, annas, and black-chinned hummingbirds. So I expect as I get more plants, I'll get even more. But I've never seen a lark sparrow in my yard in Fremont. I don't know if they were around. And honestly, I'm kind of just getting started at this, but it seems pretty cool to me. In my old house, the only birds I ever got were common feeders, unless they were house sparrows. Another yard I'd like to feature is that of Al Kite, a retired professor in Moraga. This is the front of his yard of what you see from the street. So the story, as Al tells it, is that back in 1972, he had just moved into the house and he had a lawn and ivy. And it wasn't long before he grew tired of mowing, watering, hedge trimming, edging, and on and on. And they were already worried about droughts and saving water. So around the same time, Al and his wife became birders. As they took little birding trips around the state, Al was really impressed with the habitats that he saw. Specifically, he loved manzanita. He decided that it would be really nice to have some of that manzanita in his own yard, but why stop there? His yard began to look like chaparral-covered trails of Mount Diablo and other birding hotspots that he loved to visit. and the places that he would go fly fishing. So advantages of chaparral backyard have to do with water savings, low maintenance, and currently it's unusual and attractive. Chaparral is something of a catch-all term because it encompasses a lot of plant mixes. Al pointed out that in some of his favorite places, the manzanita is broken up with yerba santa and chamise and other things. But the list of chaparral plants seems endless. And the neat thing about working with chaparral yard is that you get to decide the plant mixes. Manzanita is a favorite of Al's, and with that gorgeous red bark, I think many people like it. But you can make up any variety of chaparral you like. You can choose a particular part of your yard and make up the hills of Mount Diablo and another similar simulate coastal scrub. It's really up to you. Or you could specifically look for the local natives and showcase your local flora. And with Calscape, you can do that. So Al's yard has plants from all over California. But I have to tell you that if you were able to shut off all the lawnmowers, backpack blowers, and passing car noises from his yard, you'd be amazed at the sounds in his yard. The Steller's jays, oak titmice, California quail, California towhees, and of course the hummingbirds that wouldn't stop calling were amazing. We were trying to shoot a video back there, and we kept hearing the birds calling. It was really cool. Al's yard has been featured on the local native garden tour. Al is 85, and it takes a lot of effort to host a garden tour. So we may have seen his garden on the tour for the last time, but I included a bunch of stuff on the resource page so you can get more information on what plants he's got in his yard and stuff like that, and learn a lot more about Al's garden and about his views on how he's got tips and things like that. There's a lot of information on the website link that I gave to Barry for the resource page. So let's see. I'm posting. I was going to say the same thing. Look at that. He's got like a bunch of different kinds of manzanita in his yard. Anyway, I taped a brief interview with him. Unfortunately, when I tested things out with Barry the other day, we learned that videos don't do well on Zoom. So I elected to do things mainly with slides. Unfortunately, I'm going to try, I'm going to talk at the end about what I might be able to do, and I might be able to try and resurrect that interview and put it on YouTube and get it over to Barry to have him put it up on YouTube for the chapter YouTube page. So as I drove around Al's neighborhood, I couldn't help but notice that other yards in the area also have chaparral plants, not normally seen in typical landscaping. I actually saw baccharis in one yard. You don't usually see coyote bush in a front yard. I think Al is having an effect on Moraga. And I noticed a number of chrysalis on the wall of his house. And I asked him what they were. Al planted pipevine for pipevine swallowtails. They arrived and climbed up the side of his house and are pupating up there. So that's just really, really cool, I think. Another garden I want to talk about is Ulistack Natural Area. This was an old golf course. After some of the land was developed, the city of Santa Clara had an area left over. They have an active volunteer crew that has been actively converting it back to natural chaparral and oak woodland. It is now regularly birded for Audubon field trips. The nearby Guadalupe River has a nice wide natural area between levees, and Ulistack is easily drawing birds from it. The riparian habitat of the river blends really well with the chaparral and oaks of Ulistack. So this is La Loma Native Garden in Modesto. It is a central creation of the La Loma neighborhood. They have La Loma Park, but the real pride of this tight neighborhood is this native garden. Volunteers turned a roughly 1/5 mile long strip of city-owned dirt into a community garden featuring native plants and trees that need little water, a butterfly garden, bird habitat, and a walking path running through it all. That is how the local paper described it. La Loma's native garden is celebrated with a pollinator festival, at least when it isn't stopped by disease. I attended the first annual festival. I have lots of photos of the festival, including booths from the Boy Scouts, 4-H, and many other agencies and organizations. It is truly a point of neighborhood pride. They've planted valley oaks in among the other native plants. This was just a median strip prior to becoming a point of civic pride. And their Facebook page shows artists coming to paint the landscaping, and people I talked to who were walking by say that they deliberately planned their dog walking and jogging routes so they can walk through the beautiful garden. School kids from nearby school are documented on the Facebook page coming to check out the plants and the wildlife that they attract. If I didn't have so many photos that I took myself, I could have populated this page with the Facebook photos, including those with butterflies like the bull fritillary that visit the garden. The garden was started as a community effort with support from the city of Modesto to improve a neglected strip of land and provide a usable space for the neighborhood. Much of the assets in the garden came from donations and neighborhood efforts. Modesto Subaru is a supporter to help with needed improvements. There are various sections of the garden. The Blue Garden hosts blue-eyed grass, ceanothus, Cleveland sage, and other bluish blooms. The striking dark blue blossoms on the ceanothus are a must-see and attract a large number of bees, both native and honeybees. Another developing color is the yellow garden, which has sunflowers, wallflowers, and other asters. Another one I want to tell you about was, let's see, there we go, Cabral Ag Center in Stockton. So the UC Master Gardeners created this garden. It includes the California Native Garden as well as other themed gardens. What I love about this garden is that despite the fact that it is fairly far from anything I would call habitat nearby, the variety of native birds visiting it is immense. It really has a gold mine of local birds because they have to travel a ways to come from wherever. So that's got to tell you that they're really getting something out of their visit. Jays and sparrows and things like that. So the late Patrick Pizzo is responsible for the California Native Plant Islands at Jeffrey Fontana Park in South San Jose. This is a cool, easy, and compact idea. And the concept is one you can think about for your backyard. The idea is that you create an island of native plants rather than having such a large area that you overexert yourself in taking care of. You set up a mound that you can easily take care of. And this is a kind of a corridor for pollinators. If we have multiple islands here and a distance away, pollinators can visit them and use them as way stations. I saw this being promoted in Indiana, and I thought, how cool was that? And then I found out Patrick Pizzo was already doing it right in San Jose. I want to talk about native strips and medians. So you saw what Patrick Pizzo did with a small area. You also saw that a strip of neglected land in Modesto was turned into a must-see showplace. Well, the story behind Primrose Way Pollinator Garden is kind of funny. Juanita Salisbury, who, like Patrick Pizzo, is the hero of the story, was not happy with an ugly roadside strip of land in her neighborhood. She decided to do something about it. She pulled ivy and began to plant natives and pollinator specialist type plants. That's when the city came by. You see, she hadn't actually told anybody about her plan, but she was just kind of hoping that she could make some changes and no one would notice it and know who did it. But it was too late. Rather than get mad like she was afraid that they would, they tacitly approved and moved on. So she kept it up, and the results were so positive, the city came back to her saying that they had other neglected strips that could use her help. She developed a volunteer group, and with Palo Alto's help, she's created a list of pollinator strips going through the city of Palo Alto. So one of the things that I love this shot from Donna Pomeroy, and I'm heartbroken that I had to remove pretty much all of the other shots that I got from her. I'll talk more about that later, but I want to talk about plant community landscaping. And unfortunately, I had to strip out most of the other plant communities. I'm going to talk about chaparral because that's a particular favorite of mine, but I'll talk about what my plan is, if anybody wants later on. So one of the things that comes naturally is something called plant communities. Plant communities are naturally compatible plants that go together well in every respect. I'd like to talk, and I found a book online. I put it in the resource page as a PDF. So this book is about 7 years old. It was by the Bay Friendly Coalition that is now called Rescape California. But the book was 7 years ago. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to keep it longer than a couple of years. Oh, I actually had Bay Friendly certification, but I wasn't able to keep it for longer than a couple of years. I ended up running out of time. I never really got the chance to go back and redo it. So, but the book is really cool. Now, I want to read a couple things about plant communities, because they're a big fan of plant communities in the Rescape California. So natural plant communities. Using the local natural plant communities as a model allows you to work with nature to create spectacular landscapes that can help replace what's so often been degraded or lost. I love that quote. Another one is about diversity. A diverse landscape includes annuals, biennials, and perennials of many different sizes, shapes, colors, and textures. It includes evergreens and deciduous plants, species that bloom at different times of year, and those that bear fruit or berries. And it includes plants that occupy different canopy levels and root zones. So I want to talk about specific plant communities. In this case, like I said, just chaparral. And I wanted to point out that this little book available online as PDF, and I've included the link in the resource page, has a page of plants that are good representatives of each community. That's what this is. If you look at it, it's actually got got all the different communities, and it's actually got a bunch of different suggestions for plants in there. You go to between Calscape and this list right here, you can get some bang up plant communities going. So the Bay Friendly training suggests you use at least 5 plant species, at least from each plant community. I think a good way of describing this is to imagine planting a whole bunch of trees of one species. Those trees all grow up and they're essentially the same size as each other. As an animal that benefits from plants of different heights and the same, from diversity of food sources, so as one, well, the main thing is that plant communities are a good thing to have around. Sorry, I got lost. In addition to the species that are recommended for plant communities, the book also describes the plant communities here as well. So I'm going to stop talking about this book, but you should know that I'm concentrating on one section of a book that has a lot of other information and is worthy of a look. So for time constraint, I've had to cut some gorgeous photos and good information on other plant communities, and I'm going to have to concentrate on chaparral. That I think it's a really important plant community, and you can do things with other ones. Let's see, I'll talk about that later. There are many different kinds of chaparral. One thing about Al Kite's yard was that he loved manzanita, and he was able to make a manzanita-based chaparral plant community in his yard. So what is in this photo is a chamise-based variety of chaparral. So everything up here, this is all chaparral, all chamise for the most part. And of course, any of these things, when you see the base, doesn't mean that there weren't any plants in there, but when you look at it, the chamise is a major part of it. So not far from the chamise-based chaparral was this sage-based chaparral with other plants mixed in. So other areas on Mount Hamilton were loaded with manzanita, as well as areas of manzanita-based chaparral. I've been hoping that people would start using chaparral as a landscaping design. Remember that chaparral needs no water once established. And when you have larger areas of landscape and you would like to eventually not be taking loads of water and time, a personalized custom mix of chaparral plants, including at least 5 chaparral species, will not disappoint. Now, I've mentioned now using seed as a tool to do your planting. And I've used native seed successfully. In fact, last fall, I got several packets of seeds of native plant species for my home here in San Joaquin County. I decided to plant it at Boggs Tract Community Farm and in Stockton, and I forgot about it. I planted it in the fall. I basically just dropped the seed. I did not water it. I let the winter rains do it. I put them down before it rained, and so basically they went through the season as nature intended. You guys, this is a seaside heliotrope, is the plant that I got this seed from, and this is what came up. Now you may notice that this is actually a video here. Unfortunately, when I was trying to use moving videos on Zoom, it did not work. And so I was better off with static slides. So what we've elected to do with this particular video is to put it on YouTube, and it is Barry is going to YouTubeize it, and he's going to put it in the link into that resource page that I was talking about. So what you see, if you were to see this video, is basically what you're seeing right now, but I don't know if you've noticed, there's a butterfly up here. And what you don't know about this is that there are bees just covering this thing. When they are camouflaged really well, you may notice one up here, but if you were to see the actual moving video of this, you'd see just all this movement of all this stuff moving around. It's really cool. And what I believe happened is that we had a whole bed, like a whole patch, a massive patch of nightshade that a lot of bees were using, and then they stripped it all out and put it in a greenhouse, and it was all gone. And all these bees that were dependent on the nightshade, they all came over here and are now dependent on this seaside heliotrope that I planted as a lark, essentially. So that just tells you seeds work, and I didn't even have to water it. I mean, literally, it took hardly any effort at all. So that's it. Thank you very much. I think I got, yeah, that was just about right. Now, I ended up with about 250 slides in my presentation, and I had to slaughter my presentation in order to get down to 52 minutes, which is still long. Frankly, some of my favorite and most beautiful slides, including almost all of Donna Pomeroy's shots, had to be cut. So what I'm considering doing is taking different sections of my talk that got reduced or cut altogether, and I want to make a separate videos of the different topics and have Barry put them up on the Audubon website. I'm thinking specifically about the plant community stuff, because I only talked about chaparral, but I wanted to talk about meadows and woodlands and all these other ones. I want to go more into detail on that that one book that I was talking about, and so I want to point out the resource page, which has a lot of information on it, including the YouTube videos on topics that I discussed, including ones that I didn't discuss. I never got around to talking about seed balls or seed bombs. There's stuff on there that you're going to be like, oh, I never heard him talking about that, was because I didn't get a chance. So anyway, if Barry, you want to go ahead and come on and
yes.
And do you have any questions?
So can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool, great. Thank you, Mike. This is an amazing presentation. You've gotten me all excited about going out into my yard right away and the re-landscaping. I love the amount of wildlife that gets hosted in a native yard. It's pretty amazing. We have a few natives in our yard, and they do get a lot more bugs than the introduced plants. And that brings more birds. And we have lizards in our yard for the first time. We've lived here for 25 years, and lizards only just made it here like last year on their own. Anyway, I do have a few questions from the chat, and I'm going to read these to you. So let me bring them up. So the first one is, what do you think about mantids and ladybugs, purchasing those as a way to control pests in yards?
Well, it's not a bad thing, because you know, I've always heard about, you know, biological controls, which is what that essentially is. What I can tell you that I'm getting more and more into the Xerces Society, and the things that they had. What they might say is they'd rather you try and draw them into your yard. There was one of the things that I wasn't able to get to, was talking about some of the housing that we can do. And one of them is there's actually a way you can make a little thing to bring in lace wings. It's basically a little house for lace wings. If you actually have a native garden, you're gonna be getting these predators. I've got the number of predators that I have in my yard is just amazing. I saw a sass of bugs and all kinds of stuff. I've got, like I said, the toads and the lizards and things like that. So I'd much rather use ladybugs than go to use pesticides. On the other hand, one of the things that they're worried about, for example, is they people go out and they get some of these orchard bees, and they buy the orchard bees, and what they prefer they do is go just trying to track the orchard bees. So they're probably out there. It would be nice to go and get a nice area where the orchard bees feel comfortable, give them the complete habitat, places for them to nest, places, things for them to eat, and all that stuff, and go that route. So I'm not gonna, if you go with ladybugs, you know, obviously that's really cool. It's better than using pesticides. If you don't seem to have predators on your own. If you basically have a yard right now where you need ladybugs and you just don't have them there, what you could do is do it once and then start planting native plants, and you're going to start seeing ladybugs in your yard.
Right, right. Well, thank you. That's really helpful. The next question is about planting the dwarf plantains. They need a serpentine-like soil. Is there some place you can buy, or is there a way you can change your soil to make it more serpentine-like if your yard isn't that way?
What I would say is there are serpentine soils around San Jose that are being wasted right now. And the question is, where are those soils? So my key to that, they said that the good soil, there's going to be like alpha habitat, beta habitat, and Charlie habitat, whatever.
Right.
And the really good stuff is where the serpentine soil is. But what I'd like to do is if we can figure out, especially if we can look like around these parks where I mentioned that you got like the open space, and where we probably would be able to get the goodwill to go in and do that. If we can go and find that soil, then you've got a perfect place to do it. My problem is I know nothing about serpentine soil. But what I do know is that when you actually look at the cowscape, it doesn't talk about serpentine soil. And that's an important distinction, because that means that you don't need serpentine soil to be successful at raising the plantain. And so what I would do is not worry about the serpentine soil. What I would do is worry about not allowing invasives to come in and take over and choke out the plantain. Right. It's basically it's going to be a project. It's going to be a project. People, we're going to need to get people who are willing to go in. And I honestly, now one thing I wasn't able to talk about was patches, because when you talk to people about putting in a pollinator patch of one species, you want to have a 3 foot by 3 foot or larger patch of plants. It could be one big bush, or it can be a bunch of, say, the blue-eyed grass, or baby blue eyes, or something like that, where you have a nice big patch of it that they can see from above, because they're going to be flying around looking for it, and you want to be able to attract them from way up high. So they come down, and now you got them. Well, they said if you want a nursery patch, so that's for a pollinator patch. That's like, get them down here to come down and drink pollen or drink nectar and eat pollen. Where you want them to come down and actually lay their eggs and stuff like that, you want a bigger patch. It's going to be because of course they're going to be eating it.
Right.
So,
Okay.
So I wouldn't worry about the serpentine soil. I'd just go ahead and plant it.
Okay.
However, if I was over at one of those parks, I might want to look and see where maybe where there is some serpentine soil.
Sure. So I don't want to go too long, so I'm just going to do 2 more questions.
All right.
And one of them I kind of answered in the chat, but I wanted to hear you tell everybody. Does CalScape tell you where you can buy these plants?
It absolutely does. And that's one of the coolest things about it, is that you can look at a species of plant on there, and you can tell if it's a popular plant, and you can tell if it's a not popular plant, because there are many plants on there that it's really good to know that they are native to your neighborhood. And it's also really good to know that apparently nobody's planting them. If it's now, the Native Plant Society actually has, like, they go out and they collect seed, and they deliberately bring up the local genotype plants. Anyway, so yeah, but you can definitely find a lot of information about where the plants are available. And if it's not available there, then as I said, you might want to talk to the Native Plant Society about it and see if they have any comments. Well, actually, that's a plant to raise, or oh, that's a great one. We really ought to look into that.
Right.
And also, the Santa Clara Valley chapter of the Native Plant Society has plant sales, and they're more likely to have this weird stuff.
Right.
That
We're hoping they'll have the sale this year, but COVID may have messed their plans up, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sorry.
So the last question was a question of mine. I was curious about the butterflies at Edgewood. Did they make it there on their own, or did they transport the checker spots up there?
No, they transported. They went down. So but this Paul Ehrlich was able to get 23,000 acres of land set aside as a refuge for the Bay checker spot butterfly. And like I said, they're not moving anywhere, but they're doing well on that land. And so what this Edgewood, it's this bang up group of volunteers over there, where they've got docents, and they got people that are going out and doing all this work on Edgewood, habitat restoration and stuff like that. And they knew that the Bay checker spot was native there, and that it had been extirpated. And so they deliberately went down and they gathered caterpillars, and they reintroduced it there. So now it's essentially a new spot of Bay checker spot.
A new island. And maybe if we make some islands down here, eventually they'll connect back up again.
Right.
So that'd be great. So thank you very much. I'll let Matthew do some closing words. And
so real quick, one last thing. So I just want to reiterate that if anybody would like any particular thing that I talked about, if you want me to go into more detail, for example, I'd really love to go into more detail about the plant communities, talk about these other plant communities that I never got a chance to talk about, go more into that book and stuff like that. I'd like to make more YouTube videos and put them up on your website to just go more. If anybody has any subjects that you want covered in that vein, go ahead and leave it in the chat before right now.
We would absolutely love more videos like that. We have one video on planting native plants, and it's one of our most popular videos right now. So I
Cool.
am sure there is a lot of people interested in that.
So market.
And
Yeah.
so the link to your resource page is in the chat here. I will also put the link to the resource page on the speaker series page when we upload your video there, and your video will also be on YouTube, and links will be in the comments section when your video is up on YouTube.
Cool.
So, Mike, I just want to thank you so much for tonight's presentation. I know it was a struggle to cut it down to the size and shape that you did, because
It really, really was.
there's so much more to talk about, and I honestly cannot wait to have you come back and fill us in on some of the things you didn't get a chance to talk about tonight. Like
And you saw Donna's beautiful pictures.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
talked about how beautiful the pictures were.
I particularly remember the guerrilla gardening, the plant ball idea, which I
I hate the fact I need to talk more about that too.
Yeah,
But
so there was so much to talk about, and
there are some YouTube videos that other people did on the balls. But I should go ahead and do one of my own.
yeah, well, you know, you're a man after my own heart, saying that you want to produce more videos, and we would love to have you contribute to the websites and because we really do want to expand on our native plants and the effects on birds and creating habitat in your backyard. That'd be so wonderful. And I think it's pretty clear, based on the response and the number of people here today, that there's a lot of interest. And I would absolutely love to have you come back sometime soon and talk again. But thank you so much for the conversation tonight. Really, really loved it. It was interesting. It was beautiful. And you've got so much to teach us about plants and habitat and the how helpful those can be for our local birds. So thank you so much. And
thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for showing up. On behalf of Audubon and the board of directors and all our members, I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to help us out here, talk about this important subject. And for those of you who are still listening, there were 2 additional speakers next month in addition to our annual meeting offered on Zoom. So look for details on those events on our speaker series page and homepage. And I promise, Mike, we'll bring you back because this is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Hey, Barry, could you do me a favor and copy all of are you able to copy the chat and send it to me?
Yes, I've been periodically saving the chat. I will send you a chat log after this.
That'll be great.
So you'll be able to see everything that was talked about. It's possible I missed a question or something.
So my contact, I put my contact in the resource page, and I also put Carolyn's in case you have a
wonderful.
So you can if you have a question, you can go to her too.
Yeah,
so,
well, and we'll update that page as more resources come in, and we realize we want to get more.
So thanks again, Mike. Here's to you. You have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Cheers, and thank you to everybody who came tonight. Really appreciate it.
I hope everybody got something out of it.
I know we did. All right, talk to you soon.
All right, see you later.
Good night.
Bye, gang.
Bye.